Hello and welcome back to the podcast, looking to do things differently, providing you with the inside track on the data and analysis that reveals how the business of elite sport really ticks. In response to a need for an independent voice in such a cluttered and noisy environment, Leonard Curtis has launched the Business of Sport series, providing validated sets of financial data plus professional commentary for major sports, all in one place. Putting it very neatly, it's the one-stop shop for cutting-edge sports research. Put it quite simply, it's all the facts and figures you need to know from the people who know what they're talking about, and backed by Leonard Curtis, who've more than 30 years of expertise in recovery and turning businesses around. We started our series with a broad look at the state of rugby union and cricket before taking a deep dive into what's happening in golf, all in conjunction with groundbreaking financial studies headed up by leading academics and experts. Leonard Curtis were the first ever company to profile county cricket in this country with their 2025 report, and they're about to reveal their 2026 findings. So what better time to step up to the crease and talk to some big hitters. Alongside me here in the sparkling UCFB broadcast studios in the heart of Media City are three men who've all contributed to the latest investigation into the health of county cricket. Who better to check the pulse rate than someone who followed the cricketing pathway and went on to play for three counties before hanging up his spikes and becoming Leonard Curtis's COO. I'm delighted to welcome David Brown. David, nice to see you. Alongside David is a man who's captained an England side to a cricketing World Cup and was awarded an MBE for his services to the sport and the leading role he's played in the growth of disability cricket. Looking forward to chatting to Iain Nairn, who heads up Leonard Curtis's office in the North East. Iain, welcome to the studio. And finally, a more welcome face and more familiar face, and someone whose cricketing achievements probably rank alongside mine. But then again, I've not gone toe-to-toe in an England shirt with rugby great Dan Carter. It's lovely seeing Alex Cadwallader here once again. Alex, welcome back. So, time to get padded up and examine the state of professional cricket. This is the Sports Structured podcast with Leonard Curtis. Gentlemen, delighted to have you here. Alex knows my first question because he's had the first question a couple of times. The state of English cricket, county cricket, call it what you like. Dying man is 0, Superman is 10. Where does English cricket find itself right now?
I would probably say about 5. I would say that because I think there's never been more money and opportunity in the game, but I think we're on a precipice now of how that money is used to help develop the county game, the international game, and all the different aspects of the pyramid. So, I think there's a great opportunity there, but, it's what we do in the next few years.
Iain, 5 could go either way. So which way are you going to go? Are you going to stay and hedge your bets like David did?
No, I was going to be slightly more optimistic. It's in my nature to be a bit more optimistic. I would go as high as 6. If only because I think there are some great people involved in the game who really now have the opportunity, as David just spoke about, to protect the game for the future.
How have your perspectives changed from playing to business to, as you pointed out to me yesterday, to fans? Firstly, wearing a kind of business hat, does that make you look at cricket differently to what it was when you were in a dressing room and amongst it all?
Yeah, I think so. I think when you're playing, you're in your own silo, really. You're only really focusing on what you can do and perhaps don't have an appreciation of the wider aspects of what it takes to run a business. I think certainly since finishing playing, you get more of an appreciation of the financial sustainability of clubs and of the game is absolutely crucial to be able to, achieve some of the things on the pitch. So I've certainly seen both perspectives now, which perhaps I didn't quite have when I was playing.
Yeah, I was going to say, is it a bit of a panacea when you're a player? You're thinking it's all about me, it's all about winning things, all about success. And then you're going to turn the page and go into business and think, hang on, the rules have changed here. Are they a little bit, Iain?
Absolutely. Look, when you're playing, you're all about the next ball that's coming down. When you step away and go into business, you can look at it, from a higher level ultimately, and you see different bits as a player. You're not involved in the business side of it. To be able to step back and bring our experience to the game is something that's really positive for us.
Alex, wearing a rugby union hat, would you prefer the ECB were in charge of the rugby union or the RFU? Or do you look kind of longingly at cricket and think, I wish we had that structure or at least maybe that money?
I think cricket's in probably a better position than rugby in England and the UK generally. I think that's helped by some of the governance. There's always going to be some criticism. But within cricket, there have been models identified that are profitable, that have led to the growth of the game. And in England, in rugby, we're still sort of scrambling for that. We've almost gone away from the T20 model with the rugby sevens. You'd almost argue that rugby had a product for the last 30 years that was fantastic. People loved watching, and we've gone away from that, and we've let that slip. And now we've allowed the IPL, the Big Bash, the 100 to take that short format game and really get some benefits from it.
There's also a former rugby union guy who signed you for Newcastle, and Rob Andrew, who's now kind of central to it. He's managing director of the ECB. Is that a safe pair of hands?
I think so, absolutely. Rob has performed at the very highest level in the amateur era, also in the professional era. He's guided Newcastle to success. He's also been involved at county cricket. I think he played cricket as well for Cambridge University, and he's not in the high profile. He's not seeking to do it for his own agenda. I think he's a very sensible person to have at the ECB that has seen all sides of the game. So, I'd hope that he's going to make a positive impact.
David and Ian, how do you look at the focus on players? Because everyone will tell you that because of the hundreds here and because the money that's in cricket, it's never a better time to be a player. Is it more accurate to say it's never been a better time to be a player at a certain club?
I would say so. It depends what stage of your career at. I think all 18 clubs, some of the perhaps smaller clubs are a crucial part of the pathway as well, and give exposure to younger players to play as well. I think, clearly if you're at a bigger club, you have more exposure, you perhaps play in Division 1 cricket, you may get picked up by more in franchise cricket, whether that is in the 100 or overseas as well. So, but I think, all clubs will give an opportunity to different levels of player at different stages in their career.
How do you see it, Ian?
Probably exactly the same. I mean, I didn't play first class like David did, so you
played up until 18 and played able-bodied cricket up until 18.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of my sort of teammates went on into the first class game. But I think it is it's the challenge that we're seeing in the world at the minute, isn't it? There is an opportunity for good people to make good money at doing good things. It's trying to get that opportunity and that break to be able to get ahead and do that. I think that's where the real challenge comes. And some of those clubs who haven't got the financial structure behind them and the ability to really create opportunity for people will struggle, and that might be a place where it's more difficult to grow your game.
Related to that question, is the 100 then good for some people and not good for others?
Well, I think we've definitely seen the 100 has worked brilliantly for the women's game. And the way that the 100's brought family into the game as spectators has been really good. But you look at the game and the number of foreign players who are coming in. Yes, it's impacting on quality, but is it taking away opportunity from the local talent who could be performing in there?
Yeah, I think with the 100, it's for me. I think it's done what it said on the tin. It's brought a lot of money into the game, and whether you like the product or you don't like the product. I think there's a lot of positivity with the 100 and what it's done. I think I'm more interested now in how, given it's taken external investment, how that's going to coexist with the county game as well, and what happens to that 100 tournament, and whether eventually that will detract from other competitions, maybe the Blast in future as well. Nobody knows at this point, but it's difficult to see as the 100 develops, as those investors will want to return on what they've invested into those franchises, how that's going to exist with county cricket.
I know we talked about kind of the schedule when you played. Now it's even more congestion. I mean, in terms of being a player, you'd love to play cricket, but you get to a stage where you think some of these players must hate playing cricket.
I think it's a treadmill during the season, in truth, and I don't think much has changed. There's probably even more cricket now, perhaps, than there was when I played, and there was a lot then. I mean, there were times when you're playing 20, 30 days on the trot, whether that's practice or straight into games. And I think, sometimes I hear football managers talk about, we played 3 games in 10 days. You used to go from game to game to game, and then even more so if you were in between first and second 11 cricket, different competitions as well. Very, very difficult, lots of travel. And at the same time, it's not a sob story. You're doing something you love for a living, and that can't be lost. But if you ask someone to perform at their highest day after day after day, and practice and work on the fitness and do everything you need to do to be successful, that's very, very challenging during an English county season.
Alex, the counter argument is that you're being paid very well, being financially rewarded very well, and you're doing something that everyone else would kill to do. But sometimes that's not enough, is it?
No, it's not. But the one thing I think the ECB and cricket generally should take some credit for, and they have sort of been dragged into that position, is that they are happy to coexist with the rest of the cricketing leagues that are out there. And I sometimes find it astounding that in rugby, our best performers, Mauro Itoje, is not able to maximise his earning potential because of the current governance. He has to play in England to play in England. And I think that's the only main sport in the UK that we have that restriction. We're over here, we're more than comfortable with Jofra Archer playing in the IPL, coming back and having 2 weeks off, as opposed to going out of Lords on a Thursday. Now, I appreciate that took a lot of infighting and so on, but they've sort of got there, which I think is a big tick, and they've found a way to try and make it work. Whereas in rugby, we still look at, arguably our best back rowers are now playing in France, and we can't pick them for the upcoming Six Nations, World Cup, so on and so on. So that is a big tick and a big question mark on rugby in the UK.
But it's also led to a kind of different cricketer, hasn't it, Ian, in terms of kind of, the guy that goes all around the world playing T20 cricket.
Absolutely, you mercenaries to a degree, travelling around, but looking after their family, creating their futures, becoming stars, and selling the game globally. We're in a global world, aren't we? And what you're doing in Australia, what you're doing in India, is very much selling the game in England, and hopefully attracting people to come watch English cricket. Without
putting words into your mouth, and I think you're kind of old school when it comes to cricket, would you be tied to a county, or would you go on and chase the money?
Oh, no, I probably would have, in all honesty, I would have chased the money. If you've got an opportunity, it's not just the money. Some of these global tournaments, you'd be playing with some of the best players in the world, and that's an amazing experience for any cricketer to be able to do. I think, money is obviously you're trying to earn a living and look after your family. It's a short career, all those type of things, but I don't think you ever do anything exclusively for money. It certainly helps, but there's also the attraction of playing these, on the biggest stage in front of the most people with the best players in the world. And I think franchise cricket has brought that.
So this time last year, Leonard Curtis broke the mould by delving into cricket.
Yeah.
And it's a proper deep dive. I think it's 92 pages. I was looking through it again yesterday.
Yeah.
Were you surprised by what you found with the forensic nature of it?
Not hugely, and that's possibly because I'm familiar with the county game and the way it works. I think there is a divide where, in particular the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of investment from certain test match ground clubs, counties, into their infrastructure. And it's clear that, those with the more financially sustainable in terms of the different revenue streams they've got other than just cricket are the best performers. Of course, there's outliers where there are people or counties that have outperformed perhaps where they could have been. And I think it shows a divide that some of the clubs which are classed as smaller counties, they're struggling financially. And, there's a difficulty in how they get themselves out of that. One, with their corporate structure, and there's lots of talk about demutualisation at the moment. But also with a very small asset base from which they can't drive further revenue streams, and I think that then is a cycle through into the type of players they can attract and the quality they can put on the pitch. And I think the 100 obviously coming in as well, which will benefit some counties more than other counties just from whether they're a host or not.
Yeah, and I think Dave said in the report last year that the haves and the have-nots, the gap could get even bigger. Is that the way you're kind of seeing it as well, Ian?
Yeah, absolutely. And you live within spitting distance of Durham Riverside. They've got things going on where they're trying to increase their revenue to be able to compete with the likes of Surrey down at the Oval, who have got massive income being generated from there. I think that it's always going to be there, the haves and the have-nots. I think last year Michael Vaughan was talking about, and he was quite surprised that we were more positive about cricket than he was expecting us to be as well. And obviously he's spending a lot of time in the game, watching, and I think he expected it to be a lot less positive than it was.
You mentioned Surrey. I mean, that they're so head and shoulders above everybody else. Have you almost got to say they're an outlier, or can you say that we can try and copy them as best practice?
Yeah, look, you're in this. You're in the heart of London City. You're getting test matches at the best of at the best of times. You're getting the 100 games. You're selling out for T20s. In the Blast, I think it is always going to be difficult for Durham, Northants, those the outlying counties to be able to compete. But that doesn't mean that they can't create their own model that works in the same way that Surrey have created a model for them that works.
But I mean, Surrey are head and shoulders, aren't they?
Absolutely. I mean, the facilities.
I mean, all the ingredients work for them, don't they?
They do, but I think you've got to give Surrey credit as well. They've been able to invest, and they've invested well in their infrastructure, their conference facilities, their other revenue streams that they've developed to help sustain the club financially. You know, they're not just a county cricket club, they're an events business, hospitality business, and there are other counties that have done the same. Lancashire, similar, have, you know, built hotels and other revenue streams. So I think Surrey, not everyone is going to be able to be a Surrey. You know, they are in a great location in the city, and they've got a huge fan base and exposure. But I think that model of how you could develop your business to not just be just cricket's still incredibly important, is essential for the counties to take note.
But what's interesting in that is that people are now talking about bringing more cricketing expertise to go alongside that. I mean, we've got Lancashire down the road. They're bringing in cricket people because they find themselves in Division 2 with a bit of debt, a good financial model that will probably get them out of that debt, and yet they now want to see it turn on. You can't just turn on performance like a switch.
No, and I think sometimes naturally in sport things sometimes work in cycles. You know, if you take a football example, Manchester United dominated the game for however many years, and then have had a period of a decade where they've not done anywhere near as what they did before. I think similar can happen in cricket as well. I think Lancashire have built a great foundation in terms of what they've got financially, but the results don't argue that they haven't performed probably where they used to perform. In particularly, I grew up watching them in the 90s. They used to win every trophy going. They had a great squad. So whether the focus has gone off cricket or not is difficult to say, and I'm not in the inside with that, but the results show that they haven't performed as they could have performed, you know, as they've done historically. So I think they're trying to make inroads into bringing some more cricket people, more expertise onto that board. Who those people will be, there's lots in the press at the moment on who those people might be, but I think it's absolutely crucial. You are also a cricket club, and members as well. You want to perform on the pitch, you want to develop players, and you want to be successful. That's what you're about.
Alex, wearing a business head as well as your rugby head, it's great having members in cricket, but do they kind of get in the way in the sense that the whole operation could be far more successful financially if you could bring in investment from outside? You know, demutualisation is being mentioned, Middlesex are talking about it, Yorkshire are now talking about it. Is the day of the member rapidly coming to an end?
Not necessarily, and it's not always just a silver bullet letting someone come in with some financial backing and their own ideas. I think they can coexist, and what we have seen in lots of sport is sort of heritage, tradition just being sold to the biggest bidder, often from far afield with different objectives that don't necessarily align with what that sporting club is there to provide. And as we discussed previously, you know, sporting clubs and sport itself is in that sort of crux position that it's there to service more than its shareholders, its owners, and delivering a return. It's there to produce a professional team that wants to compete and win trophies, but also provide something to the local community and society as a whole. So it's trying to get that all together is a challenge. So no, I don't think members' voices should just be quietened and dismissed, but you do want to have the ability to communicate with them and put your point across and to engage with them to say, this is where we are currently heading. And, you know, sometimes it's great to have passion, absolutely. And, you know, in my sport, one of the real challenges is the Welsh game, where they're as passionate as everyone. And you're often told that, you know, Abervale or Swansea beat the All Blacks in 1930. Why can't we compete with Bordeaux and La Rochelle now? But the economics are just chalk and cheese. You're comparing, you know, Walmart to, you know, a market stall, and they can't compete. So in a roundabout way, James, I'm saying, yes, you need to listen to them. They shouldn't just be dismissed, but they need to understand if you're trying to achieve X and get to the very top, you do need to have some smart business acumen and make sure investment is coming in and then being put in the right place.
So is it finding a model that works that allows both, Iain?
I suspect so. I mean, look, a lot of the members of county clubs will be older people who are there watching the 4-day game and enjoying themselves. They probably make up a small proportion of the people who actually watch the wider form of cricket, you know, the 100, the Blast, and the 1-day games. So I think they are important people because they provide that steady income to the county. But providing your answers for only those members might be challenging and taking away from the hundreds of thousands of other people who actually come through the gates and might even spend more money overall.
But I'm just wondering, when you've got Yorkshire a host of the 100, they're a test ground or an international ground, and they're saying it could be a disaster if we don't demutualise. It's not looking good for everybody else, is it?
No, I think Yorkshire as well is a unique case. The well publicised troubles they've had in the last few years regarding the racism scandals and stuff, and I think that's clearly impacted the club financially. They've had a huge branding factor as well with Colin Graves over the years. So, I think ultimately they perhaps are slightly different to some of the other counties given that history. But I think, to echo Alex's point, it's not a silver bullet demutualisation, but I do personally believe to attract external investment, you're going to have to demutualise, right? That's the point where that investment then is put, and what's the strategy in getting the right people in. We've seen, again, to use another football example, we've seen some of the disasters with external investors and the foreign owners and those kind of things coming into the game, where some have worked unbelievably well, and some have been well publicised.
I'm delighted with what happens at Blackburn. Yeah,
but yeah, you said it. But yeah, no, and it's commonplace now in sport. It's attractive investment model for a number of people. So I think you've got to put the foundations in place. Does the corporate structure and governance allow for that investment to come in the first place?
And I think we've got to be honest and look at success stories across the globe. And if you look at sports where there is a commissioner or there is a head honcho to a certain extent who's got the ability to affect change, push through new agendas, and I'm talking, like Bernie Ecclestone back in the day in Formula One, or if we look at the NBA, Major League Baseball, NFL, there's a very clear business plan. Yes, the owners have to have their own agendas as well, but they are all working together. And there's no one there sitting there saying, actually, look, I like turning up on a Tuesday afternoon to watch 2.5 days worth of, Northants against Leicestershire with 20 other people in the audience. So I think you need really strong governance in terms of the ability to make change, especially given that we're talking about sports that have, for the first time ever, had hundreds of millions of pounds invested in them by funds that expect a return, by funds that are doing it for political agendas, other agendas that we're unaware of. So, yeah, I think let's learn from some of the success stories that are elsewhere.
We talked through rugby union's ability to chew through 200 million.
Yeah.
I mean, 500 million's double plus some. Does that make it less easy to chew through, or the guardrails that the ECB have put on it make it a healthier situation?
Hopefully it'll be a healthier situation. I understand from actually conversations that I had with the professional cricketers body, speaking to the players, that they actually flagged that this money will not be used in the same way that the CVC money was used in rugby, where in a lot of cases it was just to pay back existing loans that the owners and benefactors had provided to the clubs. But there will be some devil in the detail, James, that, as David said, if there isn't a return on the investment, what step-in rights do these investors have? What will they then do, with this franchise? And what's the wider implication?
Iain, you're smiling.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a really big challenge, isn't it? You've got the different counties. Surrey would be able to use the money completely differently to the way that Durham can use the money, the way that the ECB are keeping control of it. You're not sort of sharing the interest out as they first thought that they were going to be doing. I think there are there's room for fallout across the counties if they don't get that agreed, and different counties are going to need to spend that money in different ways. There's no point in some counties putting a hotel up. That it's not going to drive revenue, it's not going to support their business. But for others, that critical infrastructure spending will be essential, and they should really be freed up to go and do that. But I think looking after that money, in the long run, rather than frittering it away,
and they're going to have to be some different conversations. And whether you then decide, actually, given that some of the clubs only turn over X, and as you say, they're not in a financial hub, we can't put a hotel there because people aren't just going to go and use it. Do you have some different conversations? If when Rob's sitting in this chair, he often talks about netball, which is a sport close to his heart, and they moved to a franchise model and said to Bath, you're not getting a franchise just because they weren't able to hit some key metrics. So you've got a massive disparity in turnover. You've got Surrey, 75 million plus, and you've got plenty of other counties, 10 million and less. And that is a challenge, trying to take all of those on the same journey and keeping everyone happy.
Professor Rob will be delighted that you mentioned netball sitting in his chair.
Yeah.
That's really what made that flag very nice.
Text me.
Dave, when you were told about the money that was coming in, 520 million, everyone knows the figure. Was it yippee or thank goodness?
I think a bit of a combination of both. I think more money in the game is a good thing. And again, I come back to how that's going to be used. I think I cautiously would say as well that they've got to be careful as well with all the counties. There are host counties and non-host counties, and some counties will benefit much greater than others. And there is a real possibility that the gap could widen further. I think you're going to have the strong counties get even stronger with the types of money that we're talking about on the table. And then we look at, again, the return on investment and where does the 100 go in a couple more years? Does this then become a T20 tournament? I think that's, a real possibility. What does that then do to the Blast? Does it devalue the Blast? And with the Blast probably being a key source of revenue for a number of counties, what is going to happen to their financials off the back of the 100 either evolving into a T20 tournament or getting bigger and bigger? So there are a lot of questions yet unanswered. I think the money is there, and I think on the whole that could be a good thing, but it really does come down to how that's going to be used.
How do you assess the kind of process of sharing knowledge in cricket? Is it still closed shop, county to county, or are people talking more?
I imagine the probably counties do talk to each other. I would hope they do, and something Michael Vaughan talked about last year when he worked with us on the report, that they're not really in competition with each other from a business perspective. Clearly on the pitch they're in competition, but I would hope that the counties can pool knowledge and some of the Surreys and Lancashires and clubs that have redeveloped over the last decade or so, can that knowledge base be shared with perhaps some of the other counties which need to develop further revenue stream, develop their asset base, and help them become more financially sustainable.
I've got a question for the two of you. What would you deem is success with the 100 investment? Because with investment coming into other sports in the UK, we've often got European competitions to compare how well our clubs are doing. But what would you like this money to? What metric are you looking at? Do you want the 100 to be profitable and throwing off lots of money back to investors, or is it producing more England players, or what do you think we're actually trying to achieve?
As a cricket fan, for me, it's about England being the best cricket nation in the world, right? Being successful. So I think this comes back to strategy with ECB and counties. I presume the ECB's strategy is to produce players for England and to help with the overall pyramid and structure of the game that flows into that. I don't know, do counties have exactly the same objective? I don't know. Or is it just for them to be successful on the pitch and exist in their own bubble? Now, for me, the money that has come in has got to benefit the wider pyramid, right? It has to benefit the wider pyramid. Similar, we're talking about what happened with rugby and the lessons that can be learned from that. If it doesn't benefit the wider pyramid, we've got to remember that a lot of kids in this country come to cricket mainly through their clubs. Now, there will be various private independent schools that do cricket on their curriculum. And I imagine in state schools, the provision is probably not as great. And most kids would learn by going with their mum and dad or their auntie or uncle to a cricket club and learning the game there. And therefore, running these local cricket clubs is very, very difficult. Very difficult to survive, will depend on a huge amount of volunteers. And in order for the game to be sustainable, that money has got to try and trickle down to all aspects. Talk about women's cricket, talk about disability cricket. It's about a wider participation, because without the wider participation, you're not going to, at the grassroots, you're not going to produce the England players.
They're challenging themselves to make it the most inclusive sport in the world.
Yeah.
And I know the pathway you came through. I know, Iain, you were at university, but David, you went through the university pathway with the cricketing expertise, excellent centre of excellence, excuse me, and that's been pulled.
Yeah.
Can the two not coexist?
Well, I think so. The wider point with the university cricket for me, and I'm obviously hugely in favour of it. I benefited from it. I signed on a junior contract when I was 18 or 19 at Lancashire, having come through their youth age group. Wasn't quite good enough at that age. Learned from that lesson, went to university to get something off the back of that to support me in case I did make it. You're always going to have your players like James Anderson, Ian Bell, Alistair Cook, who will make it in any system, right? They're generally generational talents. I needed 2 or 3 more years to get better, and it allowed me to play professionally. But the offset of that as well, and the catalyst from that is then feeds down into club cricket. So it's not necessarily about how many people make it from the game at University Centres of Excellence, but those people then go back to their clubs, back into schools, they coach the game. It benefits the wider pyramid. And what I would say, though, at the same time, is the number of county cricketers that have gone through the university system is in the 3 figures. There are a lot of players that have done that. The PCA do a huge amount of work to help players prepare for life after cricket. It's a short career. Contrary to the reports where there's a few who earn a lot of money in cricket, the average county cricketer would not earn life-changing sums of money. They could earn a decent living, but not life-changing. And therefore, at some point, the money that's needed to invest to help those players transition into something after the game happens either at a later stage or an earlier stage. So the university system is not just about, does it produce players for England? It helps the wider infrastructure. And it shouldn't really be a question of, you can't invest in that, so you should invest in that. You can do all of it. There's enough money now in the game to be able to do it. And you're talking about relatively small sums of money. I think the university centres cost £300,000 or £400,000 a year to run. When I was there, it might be a bit more now, but you're talking probably £2 or £3 million a year to benefit the wider game and also give those players the chance to become professional later on, who would have otherwise been lost.
Well, I was going to say, we're sat here because you went through the university pathway and played cricket.
Yeah. And the university gives you the skills in life. Cricket gives you equal skills in life. I think it's that personal skill, the ability to sit with people and converse whilst you're watching your friends bat and be part of that team. That it's really essential. Durham, where David went round the corner from me, the guys who were leading UCCE, coached me locally as well. Yeah. So the impact that it has across the whole of the cricketing spectrum is massive.
I talk about inclusivity. Your children play cricket, Alex.
Yeah, I love the fact that I can on a Sunday go to my local club and watch my 9-year-old daughter and 7-year-old son play in the same team. And they quite enjoyed seeing Court Cadwallader last Sunday. So it's fantastic. And I think, cricket is one of those sports that also doesn't have sort of the injury and concussion, head injury sort of scandals, if you want to put it, that football and especially rugby have. And it is a great sort of social game, and it teaches you your own personal responsibility because you need to deliver, but also working as a team. So there's some fantastic life lessons, and I think you can learn a lot from it. So that side of things, I think, is essential. But there's always a challenge between the amateur game and the professional game. And especially when you've got people putting hundreds of millions into it, they want a return. And how focused really are they on Durham University cricket?
And the answer for the ECB seems to be, well, we'll target state schools and we'll make cricket big in state schools. Is that something that works? It's not something maybe that works initially.
I think you've got to give the opportunity to play, right? And I know there was some government funding that was down a few years ago, then it got pulled with a change of government and or subsequently reduced significantly down to a couple of £1 million. I think you've got to provide the opportunity for kids to play. Not everyone's going to love cricket. Not every kid's going to love cricket. But if they don't have the opportunity to play at school and learn and have a role model who they can look up to, then where they're going to start, and generally it's only if their family are into cricket or they have a family member who says, right, come down to the local club, that they might get into it. So I think, and that's the same for every sport, whether it's cricket or golf or whatever it may be. So I think investment in state school cricket is essential to give kids the exposure to playing. It's not necessarily a cheap sport to play. You've got to buy a kit, the bats are expensive nowadays. And money being a blocker from somebody being able to have an opportunity is something that, I would think governing bodies and government should be looking to address.
It's probably quite a challenge, though. You look at the state system. financial challenges that they have in providing the resources for the kids to do it. You know, the ECB have got All Stars, which is a brilliant thing to get kids into clubs and playing. But then it's that sort of teenage years where you really see the drop off as the other distractions come, be that exams and girls and boys. And I think that is the real challenge of keeping people in the game. Then you even see it in clubland now. Saturday teams. You might have had 3 or 4 teams playing on a Saturday, and now they're down to 1 or 2, and really struggling to get the quality out there. That's all part of the challenge that the game is dealing with, and that's, to me, what the money from the 100 needs to be trying to fix as well. That that grassroots bit that drives your players for the future.
Well, that should be the aim for all sports, that we can make it sustainable, we can make it welcoming, but we're also putting something back into the community, so that we're giving, not just the youngsters, but everyone something to do on the weekends, instead of, getting distracted and pulled into other areas of life. Because it is our CEO has got a big background in boxing. There's a lot of friends in boxing, and that's a great sport for, pulling people back onto different tracks and trying to really change their life. And that's what sport can do. It is passionate. It creates passion with fans. It is emotive. But it's also now become a business, and we have to find a way to, try and bring those two things together.
Iain, one of the things the 2025 Leonard Curtis report did really well was to shine a light on disability cricket, and it's done that in the 2026 report as well, which goes into detail and loads of other bits. But flying the flag for disability cricket, what you do very well, and got the MBE, if you like. How healthy is it? It seems to be going in the right direction, but I'm not a qualified judge of that.
Absolutely. Look, disability cricket has been going a long time in England and around the world. Faced some challenges immediately after COVID. So we had physical disability, learning disability, deaf and visually impaired cricket. They've now merged the 3 other than the visually impaired cricket together to create this pan-disability tournament. So we've got the Disability Premier League now, which is sponsored by Toyota. The same, you're following the England men's team. It's great to see that investment going in. The England pan-disability team have now played India in bilateral series twice. India are back here this summer, including another game at Lord's. So it's all going in the right direction. And for me, that is sort of taking away just the medical bit of the team and putting everyone together is the only way that the game can really push itself forward. Having the different categories where you seem like the natural way to do it at the start, but trying to get the numbers involved in the game, you're finding 11 people with physical disability, finding 11 people with learning disability.
That would be a perfect world if you could, though, wouldn't it?
Yeah, and do you know what? Maybe in 40, 50 years' time, as the game has developed through the pan disability, you can then branch out. You look at the Paralympics, you have T44s and T45s competing with each other in the same race. It's still the same race, but they're competing for themselves within that. And I think ultimately, you put everyone together, it creates opportunity because you can have more people playing. The DPL's a 4-team tournament at the minute. If we can get that up to 6 and 8, there's more people then experiencing high quality elite cricket with disabilities. That means that more people can fight for places in England, and you might be able to then go back to the additional disabilities.
I was going to say, could you see a world where 5-10 years time it might be part of the 100? You might have 3 back-to-back games, men, women, disability team. It
would be amazing. I honestly think it could be done now. I think if some of the hundreds could commit to supporting one of the disability teams, or at least allowing them to be part of the day. For years, England women have sort of fought to be seen and to get their exposure, to create people and a view of the pathway for young girls coming through. We need to be doing the same for young disabled people to show that there is a route forward that you can go and represent.
David, there are some sports where people are guilty of saying things and not doing it. I don't think that's true of cricket. Disability sport is on the rise. We only have to look at the Women's World Cup in this country to realise the profile that's got there. So they are doing as well as saying, but whether they're doing and saying as quickly as they should be.
Well, I think it's difficult. I think there's a lot of credit in terms of the way women's cricket in particular has developed in the last 5 to 10 years, and the investment that's gone into that to allow women to be full-time pros as well, and be well compensated for that, and given the opportunities through the 100. You've got to invest in some of these things to begin with to allow it to grow. And without the investment, it's never going to have a chance.
And 100 has done a massive job in doing that.
Huge job. And I think, the fact that it's played on the same ground, the same day, it's an event for the whole day is a really good concept. And I think, I go down to my local cricket club at Burnley, and we mentioned All-Stars earlier. A huge amount of girls are now at All-Star. My daughter goes down and she plays, and I think the trickle down effect of more girls wanting to take up the sport and play the sport, and I think it's a brilliant sport for girls to get into, similar to the reasons we talked earlier for playing in a team, but that individual accolade as well, the social aspect, and how they can develop and meet friends and develop that way as well is amazing. So I can see the impact that investment in the women's game at a professional level has had for more junior players, and those junior girls who are playing cricket have role models now. Some of the England players and how good they are. I think it's great for them.
I was just going to say, we've just had the Women's World Cup here, and England winning that. It was rugby seeing the same sort of flow into the game on the women's side, because again it was well supported from what it looked like on the TV.
Yeah, I think I'd probably say rugby is still a step behind cricket in that, in the final, England played against Canada, and Canada had to do a GoFundMe page to pay for them to have a physio at the final. So, that's we're still a long way off. England are at the forefront of really trying to promote it, presenting the game in a certain way, selling out Twickenham, and there's some absolute superstar players, and the quality of the game has improved. I do think personally that cricket does have that advantage in that even parents at the moment are concerned about young Johnny playing rugby. Yeah. They're probably even more concerned about young Jessica playing rugby, whereas cricket doesn't have that impact, and I think it has made a massive step forward. But it's fantastic. You now, especially with a lot of our main sports being behind paywalls, it's quite nice on a Saturday, Sunday morning when you're at home with your children, looking for some sport on the terrestrial channels. It's very easy to find, women there performing, and the next step, will be sort of the disability sports and so on and so on. So that goes back to my point that if you look at the NFL, and if you've ever been to some of the games, how they massively promote often people that have come back injured from servicemen in the military. You go to the NFL game and you're almost looking up to those people as much as you are Patrick Mahomes. They're properly in the spotlight. It's part of the ethos of the NFL is to promote doing good things into society. Thanksgiving days, handing out all the turkeys and so on and so on. So I think let's get stable, profitable businesses that can then feed back into society as well.
I think as well on that point, you particularly nowadays with sustainability of organisations, and particularly cricket, and you look at it and want to attract the best sponsors, they also have requirements to invest in businesses essentially which are inclusive, which are sustainable, and therefore not only is it the right thing to do from a society perspective, I think it makes good business sense as well to have these different facets of participation across the whole spectrum.
And when you won in Bangladesh, how big a step forward was that for disability cricket in this country?
At that stage, it was massive. It was the first time that more than two teams in disability cricket had got together and played. We were playing live on TV in Bangladesh. Millions of people were reading about it because it was cricket in Bangladesh. They were all over it. You come back and so that was 2015. We then played two series at home by 2019. That was almost unheard of to have had that regular cricket happening. Unfortunately, then COVID stepped in the way and caused some damage and probably put it back a few years, but then brought about the pan-disability stuff. I think everything there's a reason for everything, and it's created this new opportunity.
I want to finish off by gazing into the future and looking at what cricket's going to be in 10 years' time. David, I'll give you that question first. Where is it going? What are we looking at? And we're sat here in 2036 talking about where cricket's at. What does cricket look like in this country? Is the 4-day game still sustainable?
I hope so. I don't think there's any better format of the game than Test cricket and 4-day cricket. That's my old, I'm probably a purist, but that's how I see it. I would like to think there's a world where they can both coexist. I think in this country, I don't see the 100 being here. I think it'll probably turn into a 2020 competition. What happens post that, as we discussed earlier, with other competitions like the Blast, remains to be seen. I do hope we live in a world where Test cricket is still the absolute pinnacle of the game. And at the moment, you've England, you've India, and you've Australia, really, in terms of those big three, maybe South Africa to a lesser extent. Do those countries still see themselves playing Test cricket in 10 years? I don't know. I hope they do.
Killer question, do you still see 18 counties in 10 years' time?
I think there's a world exists where it could not be, because we've seen the recent news with Sussex, for example. There's other clubs which have been struggling. But
they're bizarre in the sense they're doing it on the pitch in spite of some of the stuff going on financially, aren't they?
Yeah, I think they've still got some talented players ultimately, some Ollie Robinson's just been picked for England again. They've got some really, really good players at Sussex. I think ultimately, the longer term, you perhaps see the effects of that in maybe 2 or 3 years if they're not able to sustain the financial investment into those players, and maybe do they want to go elsewhere? There's too much noise around the club. I don't know, but there's a knock-on effect, I think, in a couple of years with that potentially. I think it's totally feasible that there is less than 18 counties. I think they may exist, but they may exist in a different framework. So they're still hugely important part of the pyramid, but maybe there's a different structure that's the catalyst from this 100 investment and more money coming into the game and the changes that might make.
Iain, I think the current TV deal's up in 2028. I think we'll probably know a little bit more then, and we'll work out probably how much money has been chewed through by then. That's probably a clearer way forward, or a clearer sign of where we might be going.
Yeah, sometimes we're going to have to pass to see how the counties use that money. I suspect that we see in the professional world a contraction in the number of people in the marketplace. It wouldn't surprise me if that did happen with the counties, that there was maybe some mergers happening to pull some of the central counties together, just to make them a bit more viable and sustainable. I think that could happen. I think my dream of what we're talking about in 10 years' time is that where you're talking about the men's game in great health, with each county having a women's team playing elite and a disability team, playing around the same grounds with that same support. That would then show an unbelievable level of success from the 100 money.
Alex, I started asking you about Rob Andrew and how he ticks. How would he look at the next 10 years, bearing in mind the things we've talked about on this podcast?
I think he'll look at it as a challenging opportunity. And I think there are lots of hurdles ahead. Looking from afar, and this has got nothing to do with Rob, I personally think delivering a return on the 100 is going to be a real stretch. And I'll be happy to be proved wrong, but I don't think it's going to be a success to the level that the investors are hoping. I think it's already a very crowded calendar, and every sport is trying to find more and more eyeballs to generate more and more revenue. And why is the 100 going to be more successful than everything else that's going on in the sporting world? You've got football World Cups being larger. You can watch the IPL now in every jurisdiction. So I think that's the real challenge, is what's happening in the next 3 years with the 100, and how does that actually deliver a return?
David, I'll finish a cricket podcast by asking a cricketer, and probably the most obvious question to a COO. What's in it for those investors who've put their money forward in terms of getting the returns that Alex speaks about? Or is that the big unknown?
Well, it's an unknown for me. I think clearly they get huge media exposure and it's broadcast rights. So that's clearly why they're investing in the competition and in the franchises themselves. You see the global figures of the viewing figures for the IPL and how many people watch that. I think the challenge, though, going back to Alex's point, is I do think this franchise T20 cricket, 100, whatever you want to call it, franchise game is hugely saturated. There's so many competitions now around the world. It's why is the 100 going to be any different? Now, I don't think, the 100 is, it had a point of difference. It was quirky, but is that long-term sustainable? Are people going to be attracted to it long-term? I don't know if they are. But I think the broadcast rights is where it's gonna make or break in terms of that return on investment.
And without waving the flag too ferociously for Leonard Curtis, you're doing the ECB's job for them with this research you're doing, aren't you?
I think we're giving a view. Clearly, they're in the detail every day, and there's probably things that they don't share in public, which they can't share, as you understand, from a confidentiality perspective. Well, there's a lot of smart people at the ECB having these discussions day in, day out. But, as a cricket fan, as a ex-cricketer, it's a privilege actually to just give an opinion and what you think. I certainly have some strong views, but doesn't mean I'm right.
David, Iain, Alex, great to have you in the studio. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
And that's it for another episode of Sports Structured Podcast with Leonard Curtis. I hope we've shown you that we do things a little bit differently. Yeah, there's informed conversation and debate. It's backed up by data research and recommendations aimed at growing longer lasting and more sustainable sport for years to come.